and welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Let's take a look at what's making headlines this Tuesday, February 19th. A Chinese military unit is suspected of cyber attacks on the US. China rejects Philippines' UN mediation request over their territorial dispute. And what new measures netizens say are helping corrupt officials hide their assets. A US-based security company has accused the Chinese military of sustained cyber attacks. The US, Canada, and a few European countries have mostly been their targets. The report comes as the US government comes under pressure to protect its citizens and infrastructure from cybersecurity breaches.
A secretive Chinese military unit accused of cyber espionage. The allegations are laid out in a report published today by US computer security company Mandiant. The Chinese regime was quick to deny the allegations, claiming itself was a victim of cyber espionage as well.
And while I agree China is a victim of a lot of hacking by other players, by people inside China, the level of sophistication and the level of organization of the cyber espionage efforts really could only be attributed to a nation state. And in this case, it's China. So they're quite extensive cyber espionage efforts.
Mandiant's 60-page report said it tracked over 140 attacks since 2006. 90% was tracked back to the Pudong district in Shanghai, near a 12-story White Office tower. It's the headquarters of the People's Liberation Army Unit 61398. There is little official evidence that Unit 61398 exists, yet intelligence suggests its prime purpose is computer espionage. Mandiant said it believed the unit has carried out sustained attacks on a wide range of industries mainly located in the United States. The attacks stole hundreds of terabytes of data. Mandiant says the information ranges from details on mergers and acquisitions, negotiation strategies, to the emails of senior employees. U.S. officials have complained to China in the past about state-sanctioned trade secret theft. It is believed that copyright infringements have cost U.S. companies billions in revenue. But whether or not to confront China directly over trespassing into critical U.S. systems is a tricky diplomatic issue.
The United States Department of Defense has made a very general statement that a cyber attack would be considered an act of war, but they very consciously did not define in very strict terms what would be a cyber attack.
Last Tuesday, U.S. President Barack Obama unveiled a mandate that would amp up the U.S.'s cybersecurity. The executive order covered national defense systems as well as private companies vital to the U.S. economy.
China is rejecting the Philippines' call for UN arbitration over ongoing territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei announced the refusal today. The Philippines made the request last month. The two countries have disputing claims and have been unable to reach an agreement. Despite China's rejection, Philippines' Foreign Affairs Department says it will continue with its plans to appeal to the international community for intervention. The problem is, without its participation, the Chinese regime could reject any proposal put forth by an international tribunal. China has sought to deal with territorial disputes through bilateral talks while keeping the international community out. So far, that approach has produced little result. Besides China and the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, and Taiwan also claim sovereignty over parts of the South China Sea. However, China claims the entire region belongs to it. China's territorial disputes with its neighbors may have to take a back seat for a while. Even as China finds itself locked in a heated territorial battle for control over the Diaoyu or Senkaku Islands, as they're known in Japan, a senior Japanese diplomat arrives in China to discuss a potentially more serious threat, North Korea. Shinsuke Sugiyama arrived in Beijing earlier today to discuss nuclear tests conducted by North Korea last week. He's the first representative of Japan to go to China since a Chinese warship targeted but did not fire at a Japanese vessel on January 30th near the disputed islands. International observers are concerned how the souring relations between China and Japan will affect their capacity to deal with a potential nuclear threat from North Korea. North Korea detonated an underground nuclear device on February 12th. It's the third nuclear test since 2006. When Chinese leader Xi Jinping took the reins of the Communist Party, he said that corruption is putting the future of the regime in jeopardy. The irony isn't lost then after several Chinese cities enacted new laws that some say actually help corrupt officials hide their assets.
Corrupt officials in the Chinese city of Zhangzhou now find it easier than ever to hide their assets from public eyes. Authorities in the Fujian province city have introduced a law forbidding property registry searches for officials that have multiple residences registered under their name. As a result, there's now nothing requiring officials to disclose their assets at multiple residences, which are often illegal income. Back in 2006, a regulation was created by the Ministry of Housing and Rural Urban Development to allow the public to submit inquiries about the assets of officials and companies. But a year later, that law was restricted to, quote, interested parties. Professor Pu Xingzu of Fudan University School of International Affairs and Public Relations told the South China Morning Post, quote, "It's only natural that people connect such bans with attempts to muzzle the exposure of corrupt officials after several online exposés led to official investigations." One such case involved a top urban management official from Guangdong province known as Uncle House. Back in October, it was disclosed that he and his family had 22 homes, even though they weren't making much money. Another case involved a 22-year-old woman from Zhangzhou City in Hunan province who became known as Sister House for registering a whopping 31 houses under her family's name. The woman's father was an urban management official who was sacked from his job as a result. Back in January, Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping chaired a meeting of the Communist Party's Politburo, stressing that authorities punish corrupt officials, saying the future of the regime depends on it. Professor Ren Jianming of Beihang University School of Public Administration told the South China Morning Post, quote, "Stressing protection of privacy without a system to declare officials' assets and protect the overall public interest will only generate discontent." Similar laws have also been introduced in Yangchang City in Jiangsu Province and Guangzhou City in Guangdong Province.
And coming up after the break, hour of terror for passengers after their plane was forced to make an emergency landing. Activists in Hong Kong are calling to free a man jailed for burning the Chinese flag. And a fairy tale come true for the world's smallest Disneyland in Hong Kong. And welcome back. Imagine looking out the window of your plane and seeing the jet engine cover tearing off mid-flight. That's what happened to passengers on one ill-fated plane in China's northeastern Heilongjiang province. Here's their harrowing tale.
It was an hour of terror for passengers of China Southern Airlines flight CZ3624. According to a window seat passenger, just moments after takeoff, the entire plane shook and the left engine's cowling came off. Then the strange noises began.
From where I sat, I could clearly see the left engine with its cover broken off and the inside structure exposed.
As passengers made it to safety inside the airport, they recall their harrowing ordeal.
It was really thrilling, as if you went through a life-death test. Many thoughts entered my mind at that time.
With over 10 tons of fuel, an immediate landing was impossible. And so through the shaking and the terrible noise, the plane began circling the airport for nearly an hour to consume the highly flammable fuel. Safety so close, but just out of reach. But even through the terror, some remained brave.
I'm only 8 years old and I came across such a fatal accident. My parents told me to be a man and be brave.
The Guangzhou-bound plane eventually managed to land safely back at the Harbin Taiping International Airport more than 2.5 hours after they took off. An investigation is underway to find out what happened. But for the passengers of CZ3624, it's likely to be a flight they'll never forget.
There's been another tragic loss of lives in southwestern China. 5 boys aged between 4 and 6 years old suffocated to death on Monday. They were found in a house formerly used to cure tobacco in Guiyang, Guizhou province. Chinese state media reports 4 of them died at the scene. The 5th one made it to the hospital but didn't survive. Media reports say straws in the house caught fire and the boys suffocated as a result. The boys were all from separate families, but state media say their parents were all away at a wedding. The deaths come 3 months after another 5 young boys died in Guizhou. They were inside a dumpster and died from carbon monoxide poisoning after lighting a fire to keep warm. That case sparked outrage online, highlighting the lack of welfare for children in China's rural areas. A Hong Kong democracy activist was recently sent to jail for burning the Chinese flag, but his supporters are calling for his release, saying his actions simply reflected how many feel towards the Chinese regime.
Human rights activists gathered outside Stanley Prison in Hong Kong on February 17th. They're protesting the harsh 9-month prison sentence given to pro-democracy activist Siu Ku.
Freedom of speech and freedom of association are important for Hong Kong people to supervise and criticize the government. The government cannot use any methods to stop or suppress this.
Ku was convicted on February 7th for burning the flags of the Chinese regime and Hong Kong. He claims the regime killed dissident Li Wangyang and has criticized the Hong Kong government for being controlled by Beijing. Li Wangyang was an activist during the 1989 Tiananmen protests. He died last June in what authorities called a suicide. His death sparked massive protests in Hong Kong, with Li's supporters questioning the official version of events. Activists in front of the Stanley Prison say Ku's actions only reflected how they felt about the Chinese regime.
When the acts of a government no longer earn the respect of its people, how can its flags earn our respect? This only shows our anger and utmost discontent towards the dictatorship government and the Communist Party.
Under Hong Kong's flag and national emblem ordinance, defacing flags can result in a jail term. Jackie Hong from the Civil Human Rights Front says they will help Ku to appeal his sentence.
The smallest magic kingdom in the world is in the Middle Kingdom, in Hong Kong to be precise. Mickey dances down Main Street every day, but now there's a new spring in his step. The only Disneyland in China has run at a loss for 6 years. Now, for the first time, it's in the black.
Hong Kong's Disneyland parade had all the more reason for celebration on Monday as it turned its first ever net profit. Hong Kong has the world's smallest Disneyland. It opened in September 2005, but it was only in the last year that it made its first net profit of $14.1 million. The theme park's managing director said the resort turned a corner after it opened new attractions.
Because of our expansions, we have expanded our capacities to receive more guests, and this enables us to further grow the volume of our business.
1 year before, the struggling resort saw a loss of $30.6 million. Recently, Hong Kong Disneyland invested $468 million in building 3 new attractions. The theme park's visitors registered at 6.7 million people, up 13% from the previous year. Nearly half of Hong Kong Disneyland's visitors come from mainland China, with Hong Kong locals making up a third of the guests. For local resident Vincent Wong, the park's expansion encouraged his family to come more often. His 7-year-old daughter says she likes coming to Disneyland.
I feel like I'm in a different world. It's a world filled with joy.
Hong Kong will soon lose its status as China's only Disneyland. Shanghai is expected to open its own resort in 2015, about 3 times the size of Hong Kong's.
And that's all we have time for today, and thank you for watching NTD China News. For more about China content, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel NTD on China. Coming up next is China Focus with Shelley Zhang. Stay tuned.